Hi guys, my name's Katherine. I'm one of the tutors here at Chegg. I usually tutor science, some math, English, and Spanish. And today we are going to be talking about Arthropoda, which is one of the 30-something phylums that cover all things that are alive. So arthropods are the biggest phylum by number of species. They cover 75% of all species. And so that means that there's a lot of variety, but there are some things that are pretty similar throughout. So, for example, all arthropods have what's called exoskeletons, meaning that their structural bits are on the outside rather than the inside like mammals. So we have what's called endoskeletons. The exoskeletons of arthropods can differ a little bit depending on what class they're in, which we'll talk about a bit more in a minute. They also all have jointed appendages, sorry. And that's where they get the name arthropod, actually. It means jointed leg. Finally, they all have an open circulatory system. That means that they don't have like veins or arteries or anything like that. Everything just flows freely in, like on the inside. So as I mentioned, there are different classes of arthropods. You can think of classes kind of like cousins to one another. They are all related to one another, but they're not exactly the same. So we're going to go from smallest to biggest. So on the left, we have Chilopoda, which is our smallest class of arthropods. So there's about 2,000 species in this class, and they're all like what you would probably call centipedes. But contrary to their name, they don't typically have 100 legs. A couple of them do, but usually that's not the case. They do have one pair of legs per body segment. All arthropods, and I didn't mention this before, have body segmentation, at least to some extent, meaning that there's distinct areas of the body that are separate from one another. And as I just said, Chilopoda have one pair of legs for each body segment. They also have simple eyes rather than complex eyes. They have antennae in the front, and then they also have poison claws or teeth that they use to defend themselves. But don't worry, none of them are able to kill humans. Some of them, if you were to get bit, you might, it would certainly hurt and you might have like a rash or an irritation, but you wouldn't die. The next one is, I believe it's Diplopoda. I'm so sorry for the entomologists if I am butchering this name. But there's about 77,000 species, and they contain things like millipedes, and unlike centipedes, they have 2 pairs of legs per body segment. Actually, that's somewhat debatable. Some people would say instead that, oh no, they still have 1 per body segment, but those are just 2 segments that are fused together. But either way, they have more legs than Chilopoda. They don't, however, have 1,000 legs, just like their name would suggest. They also have simple eyes, like Chilopoda, if they have eyes at all. Not all millipedes have eyes. And they do have antennae in the front, but they don't have any sort of poison claws or teeth for defense. So instead, they'll kind of just curl up in a spiral to defend themselves, and they can also release like foul-smelling substances as well. So third, we have crustaceans. So crustaceans are things like lobsters, fish, lobsters, shrimp, crayfish, and crawfish, depending on where you're from. Barnacles, and there's about 40,000 species. So, like all arthropods, they have an exoskeleton, but theirs is a little bit different. While millipedes and centipedes have one that's made of what's called chitin, as do insects and arachnids, crustaceans have a calcified exoskeleton, which has a lot to do with the pH or acidity value in the ocean where they live. They all have 2 to 3 body segments. So typically when there's 3 body segments, it will be the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. But in some crustaceans, the thorax and the abdomen are fused together, or sometimes all 3, I think, can also be fused, which, you know, is arguably not body segments, but who am I to argue with those who classified these things? So fourth we have arachnids, so spiders, scorpions, mites, and ticks. Not typically everybody's favorite, but they are super smart. They are great evolutionary adapters. They've been around for a long time, which is why there's 100,000 different species of them. They have a fused thorax and abdomen, so they have two body segments. They have 8 legs, and they don't have any antenna. They don't have any like poison claws in the front, and they don't have any wings like a lot of insects do. But they do have something called mandibles. And what mandibles are is it's kind of like teeth, but there's only 2 of them in the front. But yeah, they're for like chewing and biting prey, and they can have poison inside them. And so then our final category of arthropods are the insects. So there are about 2 million species of insects. They include things like butterflies, grasshoppers, ants, crickets, so many other different ones. They all have 3 distinct body segments: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. If it's not 3 separate ones, it's not an insect. Same with the fact that all insects have 6 legs. This is why, by the way, spiders and scorpions are not considered insects. They are still arthropods, so they're very close, but they're not actually insects. Many insects, but not all, have 2 pairs of wings. Said better, if they have wings, they have 2 pairs of wings. So like some types of ants won't have wings, but all of the ones that do, like carpenter ants or grasshoppers or butterflies, have 2 pairs of wings. So that should be it for arthropods. I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson, and if you have, feel free to seek me out on Chegg.